Essence Now Kitchen Table Talk. I'm Essence Senior Editor Sharia Jackson, filling in for our girl McCole. And remember, we always want to hear from you. You can sound off anytime using our hashtag Essence Now or by emailing us at essencenow@essence.com. All right. So y'all have all been watching Love and Hip Hop Miami, which is in all of our feeds, and you surely have heard the buzz around the word Afro-Latina, especially that scene where producer Young Hollywood asks Amara La Negra if she's Afro-Latina simply because she's wearing an afro. Wow. So unfortunately, as he has illustrated, it seems there's a lot of confusion around what it means to be Black and Latina all at the same time. So joining us, we have an incredible group of Afro-Latina women who will be breaking it down for us. First up is Janelle Martinez. She's the founder of Ain't I Latina?
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. Next, we have multicultural marketing consultant and professor, Miss Arlene Peterson.
Hello.
Hello. Then we have Juliana Pache. Did I get it right? We have Juliana Pache, who is a social media manager for The Fader, and she's also the creator of the hashtag and celebration Black Latinx History.
Hi.
Hello, thanks for joining us, Jules. And last but not least, we have the founder of Hue LLC, Miss Jamila Aisha Brown.
Hey, que sopa?
Ah,
Que sopa.
I-
That's how Panamanians say what's up.
Oh, you see me, I was stuck. I was like, hi, what's up? I don't want to offend you. No, I love it. Thank you, ladies. You all are Afro-Latina women and working in media. But before we go deeper, you have to break it down for us. What exactly makes someone Afro-Latina?
Well, it's race, before. Essentially, you're just a Black person from Latin America, but I think it's deeper than that because, you know, racial integration, race mixing, as they actually called it by name, in Latin America was actually by design. So if you look historically, after slavery ended, many countries were like, okay, you know, the way that we're gonna get over this thing is like everybody marry each other and have babies. And it didn't work because there's still quite a lot of racism. But you have a lot of people who have a Black grandparent or great-grandparent. That's where the phrase, "Y tu abuela donde está?" comes from. So when somebody is being anti-Black towards you, you're like, oh, where's your grandmother? Because I know she's Black like me. So it's like, yeah, there's a lot of people.
I need to learn that phrase.
I use it very frequently. But the thing is like you could have Black relatives, but you may not phenotypically show up as looking Black. You may look more like mestizo, as we call it, or mestiza, mestizaje. There's so many different words for it. Brazil has like 300 on their own. So yeah, it's about having a Black experience. Like, are you treated like a Black person is part of what it, you know, breaks down to.
And it's so important. I'm so glad you all are here. There's so much ignorance, even on my own part, that we're always getting over, because the reality is when you bring up slavery, which was a huge part of the history of the world, the majority of the people who were taken out of the African continent did not end up in the United States. And so when you look at the Caribbean, when you look at South America, which have these huge populations of Black people, but we don't always talk about that, how that's included within the diaspora. So for each of you, any other identity pieces on Afro-Latina? And then you got to tell us, when did you realize I am too Afro-Latina?
Yeah.
I mean, for me, we're like so excited to talk about it.
Jump in, I know.
One of the biggest things for me was just even doing my own research. This magazine actually was one of the reasons why I even figured out there were more people outside of my own family that was Afro-Latina. Years ago, a fantastic author by the name of Veronica Chambers, who was also Panamanian, had an article in Essence, and Essence came in my house. And, you know, we had Essence and we had Variedad, we had Hola, we had the Spanish language magazines, but we also had Essence. And when I read that article by Veronica Chambers, I was just like, oh my God, there's more Panamanians that I'm not related to. And this experience she was talking about in her book, that really showed like, oh wait, this is not odd. I'm not weird. You know, and I might have been like 12, 13. So at that stage of like learning even what this term was, but even going further back, Arturo Schomburg, the Schomburg Center, the reason the beginning of Black history was by an Afro-Latino. Schomburg started in Puerto Rico going and doing research about Black people because his teacher was like, Black people don't have any history. There's no heroes. I don't know what you're talking about in Puerto Rico. So he made it his point and his mission as a child to start getting that information and doing that research. And then when he moved here gathered more, started being more involved within the movement, the Black movement that was starting in Harlem. That's how the Schomburg started. It wasn't because of anything more than a Afro-Latino started it. He called himself Afro-Puerto Rican. So this is not a term that just came out of the blue. This has been going on for centuries. And centuries we've been out here trying to be like, hi, we exist. Hi, it's not a foreign concept to be Black and Spanish or Afro-Latino. We clearly cannot deny where our heritage comes from.
We're talking about history. Schomburg, you talk about kicked it off. Jules, you're continuing the conversation on Twitter with Black Latinx history. Why was it important for you to make sure as we celebrate Black history in February, we not forget the Afro connection?
Yeah, so I actually started the hashtag on the first day of Black History Month. I believe it was 3 years ago. It could have been 2. I'm not sure. It's
It all blends together.
Right? Because it was the first day of Black History Month, and everybody was really excited. Everybody was sharing iconic figures that inspired them. And I went to various Latin publications. I went to their Twitter accounts to see if they had posted anything about. So we have such a rich Black history in Latina culture. So I went on this one particular publisher's Twitter account, and they had no mention of any Black Latina people, but they had actually posted a news post about a white actress from the US. So I felt further insulted because it's like, you can't share our story, but you can share someone who's not even a Latinx person on your site. So from there, I started a thread where I wanted to just highlight like all of the iconic people from our history. And somebody, I forgot who it was, somebody tweeted me saying, you should make a hashtag. And I was like, you right. So, and so after that, I just kept tagging Black Latinx history in all the posts.
I love it. And you talk about media. You all work in media, and you talk about sort of that experience with seeing a Latina outlet that would rather highlight a lighter hue. Really, a lot of the colorism we see, even with the Mata on the show, and the issues around people wondering, is she making her skin darker, the reverse of bleaching, and the ideas around colorism. So what have been your own experiences with colorism as Afro-Latina women? Were you ever called names as a child, and how did that impact you?
Well, I can say in my family, so my dad's side, my Dominican side is the more Afro side. The Cuban side is like a situation where it's like your grandma is Black and everyone is like mestizo or whatever. But I would hear from both sides of my family, you need to marry a white boy so your kids can come out with better hair. It's like things like that. So for me, it was more so, like I didn't really experience, being light-skinned, I didn't experience like the same amount of colorism at all from that my peers face, but I felt it in terms of my hair.
Got it.
Yeah.
And I know for you, Janelle, specifically, you have a blog, Ain't I Latina, which is talking about that fusion of Black and Latina experience.
Yeah, and I think to be honest, growing up, it's so interesting, like the spaces that we are in, how that defines us. Like you can define yourself a certain way and others will define you another way. But for me, my family and identifying as Garifuna from Honduras, I mean, that's a very rich African, culture, like food. And I think that could be said about a lot of the foods that we eat. We all know where it comes from, despite if people recognize it or not. And so it wasn't until leaving that safety of that space through schooling where people started like the questions, because I do have what is considered a typical Spanish last name, Martinez. And so people would be like, and I remember actually one instance that I often talk about is there was a student that's family was from Spain. And he literally argued with me back and forth for like minutes on end about how I was using Spanish, but really meaning Latina. And I think that, that's just one example of some of the colorism, as we were talking about, like Amada, people like trying to decipher or dissect your identity to the point where they can negate it as a whole. And it's like, you don't have to prove that to anyone, but because of colorism, because media representation in a lot of our, Spanish language media, I think in particular, we have to hold them accountable oftentimes, because you will never see anything resembling this on a cover, on their websites. And, I know for myself, in being within media, like, because I constantly was looking for that, and I saw that in other areas like Essence, I was just like, I'm done with waiting. I'm just going to create that space. And that's pretty much, I think, what a lot of us have done, is just like, the waiting game, it can't happen. We just gotta.
It's so powerful.
And it's more about talking. Now there's more space.
Yeah.
Right.
For us to kind of talk, and that we're here and we exist, and this whole idea of we're an anomaly. It's like, no, we're not actually. And
Y'all deep.
way deep. We have a whole festival.
Yes,
that
we're
happens-
talking about that.
Yeah, like there's a whole festival, Afro-Latino festival, that happens in July in Brooklyn. Bunch of Afro-Latinos in Brooklyn hanging out, having a good time.
Yeah.
This Amara has performed there. We've honored a lot of people. Like, this is the whole point, and it's literally every shade you can think of.
I love it. Let me ask you this, because I think spaces like that are so important, and probably what makes it super special, we see this, is because you don't often have those spaces where you're not having to choose a box to check. So have you ever felt that you sometimes are leading with one culture over the other? Are there ever days you're like, what, I'm just going to be Black today, or I'm at this cookout, or is it like, am I just going to lean into my other cultural sides?
I think every Black person has to code switch. Like, it doesn't matter what culture you come from. And I know, as a Panamanian person whose family comes from the Caribbean, like, I feel equally Caribbean as I do Latina, as I do Black, right? Like, none of those are separate. But I have actually a very painful and powerful story. It happened to me when I was in the 6th grade. I had a student teacher who had lived in Panama. She was like an older white woman who had lived there with her husband when her husband was stationed in Panama. And she was supposed to teach us about what Panama was like. And she hadn't been there in like 20 years. And I had just been there over the summer with my family. And she's telling us all these horrible things about Panama. It's like, oh, it's dirty, oh, it's this, oh, it's that. Like your typical, like those poor third world people. And at the end of the class, we actually had to vote whether who wanted to live in the United States or who wanted to live in Panama. So I didn't just like raise my hand, I actually stood up. And that was that's when I actually decided, I was like, okay, so I have to be at 11. I was only 11 years old. And I was like, I don't really understand what this whole Afro-Latina thing is. Because also, I think for a lot of us, we were growing up in a time where it was like, you're Dominican, you're Cuban, you're Puerto Rican, you're this, right? There was no kind of like pan Latin American identity. That's kind of new, right? Yeah. And then like Afro-Latina, Afro-Latino, Afrodescendiente, like those are terms that are like millennial terms, really, like 2000s.
Even Latinx.
Yeah, Latinx, right?
Like I had to read articles on that last year. I was like, wait a minute, I got to step my game up.
And shout out to, other Afro-Latinx femmes and trans folks as well. Like the issue is that we get so stuck on the being Black and Latino that we don't talk about all of our other identities. Like people keep trying to paint us with the same brush. Like that's partly why Amara is so important. Yeah. Amara is important because I know for me to see a Black woman who is my complexion from Latin America with my hair texture, if I had seen that as a little girl, that would have changed my life. I didn't get those images at all. And the thing about colorism is like the Black Latinas that are palpable are the ones who are in closest proximity to whiteness. They have looser textured hair. They're lighter skinned. Like they have to pass a brown paper bag test.
Absolutely.
In order to get on this, like still, like even our Latino publications, right, who I will not name, they have not put an Amara on the cover. It's like we always get, Lala, love Lala. Yeah. Love her. But it's always her. It's like a little rotation.
No, it's so true, because what happens then, it creates this lie that that's the only person who are coming from those countries. So then when you do have an Amada show up, it's like, oh, that's not your real skin. That's not your real her. What do you think about people who are like, is she even being her true self?
The fact is, this is just in the same conversation as, do you choose to be Black? Yeah. This is not a choice here. This is who we are. We're not denying. And the fact that, I try not to, I really do, not to argue with the folk on the internet, I try. But it's part of my teacher background of I still want to teach you and have you learn something here. Like Juju is out here. She's cubana. She is gorgeous. She literally looks like Gabrielle Union's twin and will rattle off Spanish quicker than anybody I've ever heard. But she's not black enough. It's like, what does that mean? That doesn't mean anything. You know, Amada's, she's taking pills. No, she's not. Have you seen the girl's picture? She had to go and put up pictures to prove to people that she was black, that her father was black, because her mother is a different complexion. My mom is not the same complexion as I am. I look like my father, complexion-wise. Everything else is my mother. But here, in this space, you can't define me just because my complexion is darker and because my native tongue, technically, is Spanish. My parents chose to come to this country. You know, it wasn't we came off the boat. No, actually, they hopped on a plane. You know, they chose to come here. They wanted that better life for me and my sister. So
But for me, it's really frustrating because it's also a negation of Afro-Latinos that live in the United States. Like Puerto Rico is a part of the United States, you know, and there are communities like Loíza where there are 300,000 self-identified Black Latinos. And that community, this is why I say, like, we can't get stuck on identity, because that community has been so disenfranchised. Like, segregation is real. The economic challenges they face is real. The police brutality that they face is the exact same things that Black Americans face on the mainland. But yet, because people don't want to acknowledge that there's a whole Black population here, that's the problem. Like, people in Latin America and people in Puerto Rico are constantly reaching out to Black Americans in the United States, and we're not getting a hand back.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I think when we think of Blackness, a lot of times, again, it's like it can't be deciphered as global, and that's part of the problem. Like, so sometimes there's like this level of ownership, like Blackness is only found in this hemisphere and that's it. And I think
in the United States even.
Yeah, specifically in the United States, and there's people that really, exactly, and it's like people just latch onto that, but the fact that, like, for Amada, you know, this idea that, or anyone having to, like, again, validate their Blackness to whose gaze, it's kind of as if we go back in history, like, again, validating identity, you know? It's just, it's not okay.
You know, we have to be cognizant, again, of the history. United States had a very specific way that they dealt with their slaves. Where we come from, they dealt with their slaves differently. We weren't necessarily, we were slaves and then we were ingrained into the society. So it became a case system. That's why it's so hard for so many to even acknowledge the whole I'm Black or I have Black ancestry, and then it's like, oh, well, I have this. Believe me, I'm a mutt. We have everything checked off on here.
No,
but
you hit an interesting point too, because with a white supremacy, with the white supremacist culture, it becomes a hierarchy, right? And so often, if white is supreme, then at the lowest it's Black, and we're the most inferior of it. And so in some ways, you understand from a caste system, you're just trying to survive, but what it cost us as a people not to have that unity or that connection and see ourselves in our brothers and sisters that might have a different language.
And I think even too with Amada, like, I also think there's a narrative that we don't see, that there is not one of, like, there's a lot of pride. You know what I'm saying? There's Black pride, there's Black Lives Matter in Brazil. There's like all of these movements. And I think, again, people are so fixated on what that looks like under the context of America that, or at least North America, that they're not thinking about other things. And I mean, identity, people are super proud to be Black everywhere.
But that's part of the problem in terms of media is like, Black news outlets, when they tell the story of Afro-Latinos, it's like, when I discovered I was Black. Right, and it's like, no, like there are millions of us who have always known we were Black, always known we were Latin American, and are very proud of that. You know, like when I was little, I was like in elementary school, I was visiting Panama, my tia, I told her, I was like, I don't really like the word negra because it reminds me of the N-word. And she nearly cussed me out and was like, we are negras, that's who we are. Like, calling me morena washes down my Blackness. Like, I am proud to be negra. So, you know, that my family is Black, blackity, black.
I love that. No, it's
Black.
funny. I have a friend who's Dominican. She's like, I love essence. I'm negrita. And I want to ask you guys about language, right? Like you ladies about language, because you're saying like, for coming from an American standpoint, it's triggering because of what the N word and what words have been used here that might not have that same heaviness in other cultures.
Well, there's certain words that throughout is still going to be a trigger, like mono, which is monkey. And like, that's actually a nickname, I believe, in Dominican Republic. And I'm like, not do that. Not call, and I've had Dominican friends who think that, oh, that's cute. And I'm like, no, I don't vibe with that. But, you know, morena, negra, there's certain way, and it's really the way that it's said, almost.
Yep. Yeah.
Because you can tell if somebody's saying it to you, like, oh, morena, ¿cómo está?
Yeah.
And then it's like, negra. Like, okay, really? That's what we're doing today?
Well, negra is even like a term of endearment.
Yeah.
You know? So like, and even if you're not black, like your boyfriend, your partner will say like, ay, ven acá mi negra. So it's like, it really depends so much. Funny story, I had, when I was, well, not funny, it was horrendous. When I was living in Guatemala, I was like living and working in an indigenous community, and I was walking down the street, and this man called me morenaza. Morenaza is, it actually comes from like slavery, so it's very loaded term, like in terms of how black women's bodies were exploited. So it's like, you know, you're this black treat, essentially. Lost my mind. Like I think I channeled like all of my ancestors. Like I was like cursing him out in Spanish and English, like at the same time. Like it was ridiculous. Yeah, and the person I was working with was like, "What are you?" And I had to do like a whole explanation. But it's exhausting. Like that's the thing. Like we're being oppressed, and we still have to teach people about our oppression. Like for me, like we have to put the onus on other people. Like all the people who are saying like Amara is taking pills, and you know, like we don't understand how you can be black and Latino. It's like it's not our job to teach you. You know, Toni Morrison said that racism is a distraction, and like so is all the rest of it, right? Like this is all a byproduct of white supremacy, and we all have to do our learning. Like, or we're just not gonna get free.
And so much of that hinges on how do we create bridges, right? So how would you describe people who live at the intersection, the relationship between Black and Latin communities, and what will move it forward? Will it be women like you? What will move us forward?
It's really both sides. Working in the multicultural marketing space, I've seen literally the exact same conversation happening on both sides of how do we help our people back home? How do we do things on the Spanish, on the Latin side? And then literally the same thing, how do we help our people on the Black side? I have literally been in a major city that had a divide, Latin and Black. And, you know, the Latin store owners would be like, oh, be careful. Well, I would tell them I'm going over to the Black side of town. Oh, be careful over there because you know how they can get. And I roll my eyes at them. I go over to the Black side. I'm telling them I'm going to go back over to the Spanish side. Oh, be careful. You know how they can get. I'm like, what the heck are you talking about? It's the same thing. You are literally saying the same thing to me. And I'm telling you, we're the same group of people. The only thing that's different is that I speak Spanish and you don't. We have the crazy ghetto ass, you know, uncle, auntie, the ones you're not going to invite everywhere. We have that. You have that. We have the same thing. The only difference is language. And
powerful. Janelle, what do you think? As for someone who's consistently creating content for this audience, what progress have you seen and what you think will move it?
Yeah, I definitely have seen, it's been amazing how we've demanded some of these conversations that are now finally getting to a VH1 or some of these other platforms. So I definitely feel like we're getting somewhere, but I think to what was mentioned earlier, like we got to get past the same like just identity, and let's talk about like the inner working and even the issues that come with it. Because even when I think of conversations around like Black, like the term Black and Latino, to me it's this one and the same, at least for my identity. And so I think it starts with like realizing that, you know, even when we talk about Latinidad and like Latinx, that's we're describing an ethnic group, and you can be anything within that. And then just simply know that like we are the same. I will say this, our experiences can be different geographically, obviously globally, because in growing up in New York City, like I grew up in the Bronx, so Latinos, Black, we're all together. We went to school together. Like there was maybe some divisions, but like there was a lot, we were one and the same. But on a contextual level, I think we still have a lot of work to do. But I'm happy to see that this conversation is reaching a different like a new height, but also knowing that it's not a trend. This is what people's lives
been
are.
here.
You know,
This is reality.
And the conversation has to happen responsibly, I feel, too.
That's powerful. Juliana, you've been looking back at the history. What's the future looking like for us?
Well, what I was thinking about just then in listening to Janelle was, I feel like I was just thinking about how we got to this place where like we keep shouting and we keep like saying we're here, we exist, etc. And I was just thinking about like being in Latin American families, in countries, and like just like the dynamics and how things are set up, the structure of everything, and media representation. It feels like Black Latinx people are kind of in the back of everyone's minds from a larger population standpoint, specifically in Latin American countries, but it's almost like they don't want to acknowledge it. It's like this thing that haunts everyone, but they don't want to admit that we exist and that we're here. Therefore, we're not like represented in the media. Therefore, when we come to the US and people are casting for a role for a movie and they need to cast a Latina woman, they're gonna cast someone who looks like J-Lo, you know? So I'm just thinking about how all of these things are connected and how hard we fought to be represented in every space. That's all I was thinking about.
All right.
I was just like, my brain was just like turning.
She's like, I want to get this out.
I was just thinking.
No, I think this is how it starts. And you've been since age 11 having these thoughts and conversations. And so for you, what has you excited and what do you see as sort of pivotal to progress?
Yeah, I mean, one big thing is we have the first Afro-Latina anchor on, Latino media, which is huge. Shout out to Ilia Calderon. She's great. I jumped for joy when I saw that. Like, that's huge. I mean, like, so many Latino families watch. I think she's on Primer Impacto. It's like blanking right now. But I grew up watching that show. I know so many people who do watch it every single night. And the fact that they have a Black woman giving them their news every single day is life changing. But the thing that, I'm concerned about is getting stuck. Because the thing that people don't know about Amara used to be on Sábado Gigante as a child. So, we've always been tokenized. So it's not to just throw a Black person in there just, for some sprinkle of decoration, but centering Black people and centering Black narratives. I think that folks, millennials like myself, and then even generations underneath us are really thinking about Black, Latin identity, really understanding that the dominant Latino culture is Black culture. That's the biggest thing that people don't know about Latin America, from the food to the way we dance to everything. The dominant culture is not even just Black, it's African.
Absolutely.
Right? So I do see a lot of hope in youth, but we have to have ownership. That's the biggest thing, because if we're not in those spaces, the problem is most of the media that is Latino, whether it be in the US or in Latin America, are white. They're white owned. And, part of the issue I think where people get stuck in terms of understanding how Black people are from Latin America is that they conflate ethnicity with race. Latin America is extremely diverse.
We're not represented in the media, in Spanish language media. We're just not.
Yep.
My face is not on anybody's cover or someone who looks like me. And even someone like Amara, who is hugely popular right now, and God bless her, that this is happening for her and she happens to be that catalyst right now. But right now, there is not one of these magazines that put her on their cover. And that makes no sense. She's getting more play in Black media than she is in Spanish media, and that's bull.
Yeah.
Y'all better come through. Well, we definitely will have to continue this conversation. Thank you all for joining us. Clearly, we could keep talking all day. There's so much more I want to talk to you ladies about. Let us know your comments below. That'll be a wrap for this edition of Essence Now's Kitchen Table. Thank you to these incredible women for joining us. And you can tune in next Tuesday at 3 p.m. for an all-new Essence Now. I'm Sharia Jackson. Thanks for watching. And thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Yes.
Cheers.
I think you're going to have to make some calls, Arlene.